Want to start a podcast, or are you already a podcast host? What would you say if I told you that you can get paid up to $31 per guest you interview, and I can help you book those guests? If you want to start making more money with your podcast right now and interview great guests who your listeners will love, it's not too good to be true. It's Podmatch. If you use my Podmatch link in the show notes right now, Podmatch will pay you up to $31 per interview. Yes, up to $31 per interview. I did not stutter. If you want to make more money from your podcast while expanding your reach and getting more listeners, simply click our Podmatch link in the show notes right now to check out this really cool opportunity. Welcome back to the Podgasm Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Fleming. Lots of podcasters fail because they don't clearly understand how to speak their listeners' language, how to speak in such a way that it grabs attention and people listen. They can't speak to it because they don't know the specific outcomes their listeners want, and sometimes they don't even know who their listeners are. And look, I've been creating content for years. It can be frustrating to create a bunch of content and then it feels like nobody hears it or listens because you don't realize you have a confusing brand message, and it isn't for anyone in particular. All right, if people are confused, they won't listen. If they don't know what they're going to get out of your podcast that can help them get something they want, and they're not coming to you to get that, they're not going to listen, or they're just going to be confused and they're going to fade away. And as a result, your podcast is probably going to fail. So what I want to teach you today, I'm going to teach you step number 1 of 9. And these first 9 episodes of this podcast are the foundation of speaking your listeners' language, so your podcast will hit home for your listeners and grow faster. And these 9 key communication elements are based on combat-proven military battlefield communication strategies that have been proven to work over and over again over years and years and years of battlefield experience in highly competitive and hostile environments. Sound familiar? Maybe like the business and maybe the podcast world? And before I get to that, if you're looking for an easy way to record your podcast episodes in world-class high quality, edit them in a flash, and make them live without all the technical headaches and confusion, then you're in luck. You're in the right place because Riverside FM is the premier podcasting software for recording that allows you to produce the same high-quality podcasts as other world-famous podcasters your listeners are already enjoying. So level up your podcast right now, even if you're brand new. You're not a techie and maybe you don't have a lot of time, so you can attract more listeners to your podcast consistently. Simply click the Riverside FM link in the show notes for the best deal and to grow your podcast to the next level starting right now. So I'm going to make this very simple and very easy. Maybe you've heard some of this before, maybe you haven't. But here is my key point for this episode. 2 questions. 1, who exactly is your podcast for? Who exactly? What kind of person? Who are they? What are they trying to accomplish? What problems are they dealing with? All that kind of stuff. Who is your ideal listener? If you can't tell me that, you are lacking clarity and your brand messaging is lacking, and that's probably why you're having trouble growing your podcast. All right, people are looking to get specific information for them. So you need to ask the second question, not just who exactly is your podcast for, but what specifically do they want to get? What do they want? What is the mission they're trying to accomplish? What do they want to get, attain, or accomplish by listening to your podcast? Again, what is the mission they're literally trying to accomplish? And they're coming to you for information to help them do that. So here's an example. 2 examples, actually. The first one is when I became a professional speaker years ago after getting out of the military. I turned back around and I went back and I spoke to the military about problems I knew they had, and I was helping their service members overcome them. So I saw that there was an over 83% divorce rate among first-time enlisted, there were guys like me, in the military after coming home from war. Well, I got married to my wife 3 months before I deployed to Afghanistan back in 2006. And so we've been married at this point almost 19 years. So I knew some things about keeping my marriage together after coming home from war. And this was a huge issue that the military was dealing with. So what did I do with my speaking? I said, I help military veterans keep their marriages together after coming home from war. Who is it for? Military veterans or current service members at the time. What did I help them accomplish that they wanted? They wanted to keep their marriages together. They wanted to figure out how to stay married and keep their families together. Very simple, right? Secondly, because if you don't know who it's for, you can't know what they want. You can't just be general. So here's the second example, and I think you're going to like this one. Second example is this podcast, the Podgasm Marketing Podcast. I show podcast hosts how to say what their show is about in such a way that they can get more listeners, more downloads, and make more money podcasting. So here, answer the two questions. Who exactly is it for? Podcast hosts, people who are podcasters. And what is it that I help them get that they want? They want to get more listeners, more downloads, and make more money podcasting. In general, those are very much the main things they want. Do you see the clarity in that? Do you see how I punch through all the clouds and confusion, the fog of war that everyone's in, the fogginess and everything? It's such a clear message that if this isn't for you, you don't waste your time. But if it is for you, and you're a podcast host, and you're trying to accomplish those things, I'm going to get your attention. That's the kind of thing you want with your listeners. You want that kind of clarity so they're that bought in. So I want to ask you, how does this apply to your podcast? Think about it. Who exactly is your podcast for? If you had to choose, the whole customer avatar thing you probably heard a million times. Who is it for? And what do they specifically want? Make a list of things they specifically want, and then go listen to the next episode for step 2 of 9 about clarifying your podcast brand message so your show will grow. Again, write down who exactly is your podcast specifically for, and what do they specifically want. That's what they're trying to get, attain, or achieve by listening to your podcast. What are you specifically helping them get that they want? Write that down, and then join me in episode 2 for your next step. And be sure to grab the free Speak Your Listeners Language PDF. It's a simple 3-page PDF that's going to show you 7 super simple keys to crafting your podcast messaging in a way that will make your podcast more appealing to more people. So if you want more people to notice your podcast more often and subscribe to it, go grab it right now. It's free. Just click the link in the show notes that says Speak Your Listeners Language, or grab it at podgasmshow.com. Do you struggle to write compelling and effective brand messaging that gets your podcast noticed? Do you want more people to listen to your podcast, but you struggle to talk about it in a way that grabs their attention and keeps it? If your podcast marketing messaging is not up to par, you are losing listeners. But maybe you don't know anything about copywriting and writing marketing messaging and such. Fortunately for you, I've been doing it for over 17 years. Do you want me to write your podcast marketing messaging for you in a clear, powerful, and compelling way that grabs your ideal listeners' attention and makes them want to listen to your podcast over and over again? Each month, I take on a small, limited number of clients and rewrite their podcast marketing messaging for them. Yes, I do all the hard work for you, and you just get to enjoy the benefits of it without any of the headaches when I'm done. If you want me to craft clear, distinct, and compelling marketing messaging that grows your podcast for you so you can attract more listeners consistently, send me an email right now at podgasmshow@gmail.com. There's a link in the show notes. And put the word consult in the subject line to check my availability.